It ain't hard to tell where to get the latest merchandise from Backpack Broadcasting. Gear is now available via TeePublic. Visit the Backpack Broadcasting TeePublic online store to get shirts, hoodies, mugs, and phone cases. Represent your favorite Backpack Broadcasting shows, including the Sports Walk, Sideline Stories, and of course, the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Check out the special offers for our podcast listeners at http://t.pub/lic/backpack. Get in the game with your official Backpack Broadcasting gear today. From the Gotham Podcast Studio, Ain't Hard to Tell Podcast, episode 57, and we have our first woman's athlete here on the podcast. First time that we have a woman who's an athlete on the podcast. Really? Yeah, it is. It is the first time. We have not had a woman.
We've had women former athletes.
Former athletes, but we have not had a current active woman's athlete. Now, guest joining myself, Dexter Henry, Brian Fonseca, is Jillian DeCoursey. DeCoursey.
You did it perfect.
Yo, what's crazy is I had it before, and I asked you the pronunciation of your last name, and now I messed it up. At least I didn't add a K.
I think you did add a K.
I did add a K?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Maybe it's in my head from before.
Lift the mic a little bit.
Yeah, lift your mic up a little bit.
Yeah.
Let everybody.
I don't want to be like
right,
Joe Rogan because he tells everyone, put about a fist on your face.
Nah, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. But our guest is Jillian DeCoursey. She's a mixed martial artist from Invicta Fight Championships. So she beats people up for a living.
Just for fun.
just for fun.
And is also a mental health counselor.
Yep.
Which
also
is
a mental
interesting
health
combination in
counselor.
itself.
Very interesting combination, which is part of the reason we have you. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I just don't want to get beat up by you for messing up your last name.
It'll happen.
It's Sunday. I'm off.
Sunday you're off.
Yeah,
Although we've seen people today who haven't been taking it so easy on a Sunday.
Yeah, Mr. Downstairs.
Yeah, the guy downstairs. Jillian had a guy that didn't take it so easy with her. He didn't know what she does, though. If he knew, he might have been nicer.
Well, we've never seen the security guard before, so,
We're going to cut him some slack?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you are.
I'm going to cut him slack? So you're new to me. This is my first time meeting you. You and Brian know each other.
Yes.
How did you meet this character?
Oh, God.
Because he's a character.
Yeah. How would you describe that?
I think it was Facebook, right? Did you send me a message?
It was very, yeah.
Was he stalking you?
No, you weren't on stalker level. You were good.
I was professional, contrary to
good.
what people may believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's professional all the time.
Well, he was professional when we met, so it's
yes.
all right.
No, he's a consummate professional. He's absolutely a true professional.
Yeah,
but you guys met, and Brian obviously does a lot of coverage in the mixed martial arts world. I will come out and say I am not a expert in MMA the way this guy is.
I'm not an expert either, but
he loves violence. Let's just put it like that. I don't have that kind of energy.
Form. It's not violence,
right? That's what I try to explain to people.
Okay, explain.
It's artistry.
That's a great way to start into this, right? Like, MMA is an artistry. Explain that for people who might not think otherwise, who might say, I look at MMA, it comes across to me as barbaric, not my thing.
Right.
These are things you sometimes hear.
Cage fighting and stuff like that.
Cage fighting and stuff like that. So that's sometimes the perception that's out there. Do you feel like people ignore the artistry of it?
I think because they, especially with what do people want to say? They want to see blood. They want to see people beating each other up. So it's like, oh, okay, that's what they look for. But they don't know everything that goes behind it. Like every punch, every move on the ground, every takedown is so articulated that it is. You practice it over and over, and it's like a dance, but just with people maybe getting hurt and some blood.
That makes it sound so much nicer.
And broken joints and stuff like that.
Yeah, maybe we try and rip each other's limbs off.
Yeah.
But
dances with knee bars.
Yeah.
So I guess that then begs the question, if you can even describe it as that to somebody, why would one want to do that? Why would somebody want to get into this? What drew you into this?
Looks fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's something that I feel like it's like, when you talk to other fighters, but other people that do it, we all kind of say the same thing. It's like it's something that you can't explain like to somebody that's never done it. It's like you have to do it, and then it's either you're like, oh my God, I need to do this all the time, or it's like, nah, it's not for me.
Right.
And it's like if it's something that you're like, wow, I like this, it just draws you in because it's an adrenaline rush like nothing else. Like literally, there's someone that's trying to hurt you, but it's like, hey, we don't necessarily have beef. We might, but it's even if you have beef with somebody, it's different because it's not like we're going out and fighting on the street or, you know, like a bar fight or something. It's like, you know, it is very technical.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would say that too because like you're a late bloomer. Like it's not MMA is not something that you grew up into.
Right.
Although I'm not sure like anybody could grow up into it unless you were born within the last 25 years because it hasn't even been around that long.
Or you were born in the cage.
Yeah, right.
Born in the octagon.
Right.
I mean, you see the kids now though, like that are kind of training in it young, and it's like it's interesting how that's gonna play out, like for them, like long term.
Yeah. Because I remember.
We're gonna definitely touch on that later. Cause that's interesting. I'm intrigued in that about kids who are like into it now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, now what you see, like before, you had more specialists. You had more guys that came from a strictly boxing background or a kickboxing background or a jiu-jitsu background, and now you have men and women who are more versatile and can do multiple things, and that's sort of become the norm with this new generation of fighters because that's kind of how just things like progress.
And that is interesting itself too because I remember years ago that's kind of what it was. People just had a specialty. Even from my limited knowledge of knowing that this is the people I saw in it, like they were just Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever, and this is what they were doing. So could you tell us your story? Because, you know, how did Jillian DeCoursey, and I got the name right, how did you get in, you know, sort of get into this world? Like, what's your journey to, you know, being a fighter?
So it just kind of happened, honestly. I mean, I played sports competitively like my entire life. I played basketball in college, and it was kind of like after I graduated, it was like, all right, let's, you know, my fiance at the time, it was like, hey, let's, you know, maybe we'll start training, you know, doing something. He kind of popped the idea, and so we started training. We started doing like jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and it was just kind of something for fun. And then I started competing a lot in jiu-jitsu, and then one day we were just messing around in the gym, kind of just like play fighting or whatever. My coach was like, hey, you want to do a fight? And I'm like, it sounds cool.
I love that. That's
probably not your reaction, right, Dexter?
No, I'm just
like if someone was like, hey, you want to fight? And then you're probably like, not necessarily.
I don't know if I would say not necessarily because I'm the kind of person that's like, I'd want to try the new experience. So I'm kind of like, maybe I might want to do that.
Well, you know me, I'm going to try it.
Yeah, but you love violence.
Right. Well, no, but anyway. So you transitioned from college basketball into MMA.
Yeah, basically.
Which is very unique. I remember we talked about this a little bit during the summer, and you had played at, I want to say University of Bridgeport.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. I was trying to remember. And then you transitioned to MMA when, mid-20s?
Yeah, I did. Well, no, first it was just mainly jiu-jitsu.
And you had never heard of it beforehand?
Not really, no.
So if you could sort of break that down for us, sort of that experience of what it was like learning and sort of catching the bug and then just wanting to just do more aspects of MMA beyond just jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was like when I first started training. I mean, I got hurt like right away. I like blew out my knee like after like the first 2 months. So it was like, all right.
Which is kind of the norm.
Doing what exactly in the training?
It was nothing. It was nothing actually cool at all. I was just like pulling my leg back, and my knee went. Bah, 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 bah. Yeah, it was not cool at all. It wasn't like it was like, oh, somebody did a really cool move, and it was like, hey, it's a good story.
It's the worst when you have a bad injury and there's no cool story with it. Like I tore my Achilles, but there's no cool story for it. I was literally just going around to pick. It's like I can't even really make it sound cool.
Like Tony Ferguson, where he basically destroyed his entire leg doing press. Like he stepped off something and then just fell, and that was it.
That was it.
He wasn't gonna fight Khabib in August,
sure.
in April. In April.
So continue. So you blew out your knee.
Yeah, and then I was out for like 9 months or so.
Oh.
You know, because when you train, you don't have health insurance. It's probably not a good idea.
Right. And you still wanted to do it when you got back.
Yeah, it was like it actually made me want to do it more. It was like, all right. I mean, I already had the bad injury. Like, cool. So I trained for about
cool.
Cool can't be worse than that.
Yeah, we already got the worst part out. Yeah. So I trained I was training for like about a year, competed a little bit, and then I broke my collarbone, and I was out again for a little bit.
And at that point, you didn't say, "I want to stop doing this."
No,
clearly not.
It was like I broke my collarbone, and I like really badly broke my finger at the same time. But my finger, I just taped it up. It was like a week or two before my collarbone.
I love how you just said that. My finger, I just taped it up, kept it going, put a little ointment on it. That was good.
Right.
So then, you know, my collarbone, we go to the emergency room, and I'm like, hey, you know, while I'm here, can you guys just x-ray my finger too?
And then they just found it? Like,
oh yeah, they were like, it was worse than my collarbone. The doctor was like, yeah, we should have done surgery on that, but it's kind of too late now.
when did you get healthy?
Yeah, so then, pretty much after that, I've been, good since then. So I got them all out at the beginning. And that wasn't even when I was fighting. That was just jiu-jitsu.
That was just training.
Yeah. It was I had worse injuries doing jiu-jitsu than fighting.
Huh.
And what else was interesting, because one of the other things we talked about, because you were amateur for a while.
Oh, yeah, I did 9 amateur fights.
Yeah.
Which, for a female is, kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that crazy?
Because they're just, most go, you see these girls going pro after 3 fights.
Guys too.
Yeah, and it's just, to me, I don't think it makes sense, because once you go pro, you can't go back. And plus, it's why not just kind of build yourself up?
Right.
And plus, for me, I didn't want to just go pro with anybody. It offers for probably a year and a half before I actually transitioned. But I knew I wanted to, go pro with Invicta, so I was like, all right, I'll just keep winning here.
What was that? What was being an amateur like, though? Right, fighting on the amateur level. Try to get the experience and the reps up. You kind of had built up, through the jiu-jitsu and going through all the injuries and stuff, and now you're stepping into the cage and you're fighting people. So what was that like on the amateur level?
For me at the beginning, it was awesome. It was because I became the top dog real quick. I think I won my first, one of my first titles after I think it was my second fight, and then I defended that one 4 times, and then I earned a bunch of different titles. So it was I was top dog pretty much from the beginning. But I fought, I got really good experience as an amateur. I didn't fight I think I would only say one girl I fought was not on, a high level. Pretty much most of them went on to go pro. So it was all right, at least I fought good people. And then towards the end, it actually, it got more stressful being an amateur than being a pro, because my last couple fights, I knew that, hey, getting signed by Invicta was hanging, dangling. It was right there. So it was any little mistake that you could make.
And that contract offer could go away.
Right. It could be jeopardized. So it was all right, every fight, it was pretty much my last 3 amateur fights were more stressful than my pro debut. Because it was you lose this or you don't look good. It could get pulled away.
Right. And you were 8-1 as an amateur.
Yeah,
right?
I went 8-1.
Yeah, we should point that out.
That's a damn good record.
The only 2 losses you have are fights that you picked up on short notice.
Yeah, 2-week notice fights.
How tough is that?
Oh, it's terrible.
and the way you sound is you wouldn't recommend that anybody do that. I understand you can't train, right?
Yeah,
you can't train properly.
Well, the first one I did, it was at 115, so that wasn't too bad because I didn't have to really make weight.
Yeah.
The one I did in July, I cut 18 pounds in a week and a half.
He told me this recently, and I was like, "Yo, that's crazy! How?"
And that's not even that much. But that's not even that much compared
but that's
to
not good.
Compared to what Cyborg and Nunez are about to do.
But that's not good. That's not that in terms of health, right? Just cutting that amount of weight.
And I think it's hard. It's harder for women, isn't it?
Oh, it's way harder for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what for me, and especially because I'm already small, so every pound is triple for the guys I train with. They're like, oh yeah, I could do that easy. I'm like, yeah, I hate you.
Right, they could.
Yeah.
What is it like in terms of the sport for being a woman? Because we talked about the perception that people have of the sport in general, right? But there's this other thing that basically comes from misogyny, that people are like, oh, women shouldn't be fighting. They shouldn't be doing this. You're going to have that kind of there. They'll say you shouldn't be. Did you ever have any pushback from anybody, any family that's like, yo, Jillian, you should not be doing this?
No, for me, my family kind of have always been the one that's going to do the things that everybody's like, all right, you're crazy.
I like them.
So it's kind of
right.
So it's kind of oh yeah, of course you're going to want to go and fight.
After playing basketball.
Yeah, my grandfather used to tell me all the time when the first fight he went to, he's like, hey, can you go back to playing basketball? I used to really enjoy going to your games. He's like, this, not so much.
Probably because he doesn't want to see you get hurt.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
And, one of my uncles, he won't, he doesn't really go to my fights. Not he watches them a little bit, but he's like, he's like me seeing somebody hit you. He's like, I just want to go and, mess him up.
I understand
Right.
where he's coming from. Have you dealt with any sexism in the sport itself? Do you see that around the sport?
Oh, it's there a lot. I've been pretty lucky with everyone that I've been surrounded with that it hasn't. Everyone's been really supportive. The people I train with are really supportive. I haven't had some of the horror stories you hear. But there's a lot of, bad stuff that go out there for women who train. And, you have to be really careful kind of who you surround yourself with, because it's very easy for, things to get taken advantage of and just not go in good direction. So it's definitely out there a lot.
Do you encourage younger women? Sorry, Brian. Do you encourage younger women to follow your path or get into the sports? Is something you'd like to see more women do in the future?
I think it's definitely good for like self-defense and like as far as like confidence levels to train, because I walk around now and I'm like, all right, I hope I never have to like kind of use what I know. But I've been in situations where it does definitely help out, and you're like, all right, you know what? I gotta handle my business, and I'm not afraid if I have to do what I have to do. You hope that you never have to. But I think it is definitely something that you have to know. But the caution is too, like you see all these like nonsense like self-defense videos online of them doing like stuff, and you're like, this looks dumb.
Or impossible.
Yeah, and it's not gonna work. The only way that it actually works is if it's something you train all the time, and that's the only when it's advertised as like self-defense. Yeah, it can be used as self-defense, but only if you do it all the time. Because if somebody comes up to you, what are you gonna do? Be like, oh wait, let me think about what I have to do.
Right. And you know what? You can't reacting like that. It could be too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I think that's why Invicta's place in MMA is important also, because I mean, for those of you who don't know, listening, watching, Invicta's an all-female promotion.
Yep.
That is mainly in the Midwest, I want to say.
Yeah, mainly.
Except you fought in California that one time.
Yeah, I fought in Cali, I fought in Salt Lake, and I fought in Kansas City.
Yeah. So that's where a lot of women have come from that have ended up in the UFC and have ended up in Bellator and things like that. So I feel like that's pretty significant. And, well, the UFC doesn't have – I don't think Bellator doesn't have this either. They don't have a 105 weight class, right?
Yeah, pretty much Invicta's like where it's to be for 105s.
Yeah.
They don't like us little people, man. They're biased against us.
But it's weird because, like, for example, we were talking about this right before we got on. UFC has a 145 champion. They don't really have a 145 weight class. Whereas I feel like with atom weights, you can assemble a weight class.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you could definitely, and you'll probably get a lot of women who want to come down from 115 straw weight to fight at 105. Do you feel like one day we'll see 105 at UFC or Bellator or both?
Yeah, I think definitely it'll happen one day. It's just when, because the UFC is all about, like, they got to, like, play it out and wait, and it's like, even with the guys, they're taking away some of the smaller weight classes.
Flyweight.
Yeah. It's like,
that's why Cejudo and Dillashaw are fighting each other at Barclays next month.
Kind of,
that sucks.
That doesn't really make much sense. But, it's like, oh, well, there's less knockout power. Yeah, but it's more exciting. It's more technical.
Right, yeah.
And you still see the knockouts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you still do see
happen.
that.
Right.
But, yeah, you'll definitely get some women coming down from 115 if that were to happen. So I feel like they should do it. It's just, and it's also going to take time because, like, they still haven't figured out the women's flyweight situation.
Oh, yeah. It's like all over the place.
They just finally got a real, like, champion.
Yeah.
Before they had, do you remember do you not remember because it's still on? You know the Ultimate Fighter reality show?
Uh-huh.
Right? So they had the winner of that show crowned the inaugural champion.
Really?
Yes. Late last year, Nico Montano didn't defend it for a while. September came, she was going to fight Valentina Shevchenko and pulled out, and then UFC ended up stripping her of the title because she pulled out, but they had to rush her to the hospital. I don't know what exactly the full like accurate story is. Valentina is suspicious of her even wanting to fight to begin with, and now they finally a year later have Valentina as champion because she beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So,
and when is she defending?
Probably sometime next year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she just fought.
She just fought like earlier this month.
So, speaking of fights, your next fight is what's next for you? When is your next fight?
I mean, I was hoping to fight in January, but it doesn't look like it's happening now. So now it's just kind of like it's like a waiting game, and it sucks.
You don't want anything on short notice, right?
Obviously you don't want short notice, but it's part of the game. You don't really have a choice sometimes, and it's like, all right, that's the hard part of it because it's like you have to give your body time to like recover and be on point. So then when you do have a fight, you're not burnt out. But then at the same time, sometimes you don't know when you're going to get the call, so it's like you got to stay somewhat ready. So it's like a balancing game. Yeah,
that's tough having to stay ready with that. Have you stepped into the cage, and has there been any woman you've seen where you're like, oh my God, like I don't know. Have you actually ever felt any intimidation, or does that not cross your mind when you're looking at your opponent?
The only time I would say that happened was at my one amateur fight that I took on short notice at 115. It was my only loss as an amateur. And it was more the size difference. That was when I was fighting at 115, and I was like, yeah, no, like if I want to go pro, I got to drop down to 105. Because at that point, I was like even smaller than I am now, fighting at 105.
Huh.
And it was, I wasn't cutting weight. I'm like showing up to weigh-ins like a jerk, like with food in my mouth on the scale, like drinking water in front of everyone. But the size difference and the power difference, and like, she landed her first punch, and I was like, oh, this chick could knock me out. I was like, all right.
It got real really quick.
Yeah, and it was like I never felt power like that.
I don't think people could sort of process that.
Yeah,
because like a regular person,
right? And I always think about that in any kind of these combat sports. It's like when you feel that first difference in what you know, because you can spar with anybody, and
like when Rocky Fielding, who just fought Canelo Alvarez.
Yep.
When he just fought Canelo Alvarez, and he probably felt that first body punch.
What was that moment?
Oh, my God.
Like, oh, this is real.
I still remember the first punch from my first fight that I got hit with. Because that was the first time you ever, when you're training, you're wearing big gloves. You're not, if you have the small gloves on, you can't hit each other full force because nobody's going to make it to a fight.
Right.
Yep.
So, it's something very different. Like that first punch that I got hit with in my first fight. It was like, oh, this is what we're doing. All right.
Right. It's the wake up call. Do you spar a lot? I wonder this because like a lot of fighters I feel like are sparring less and less just to, not get as much brain damage as they probably would.
Yeah, I mean it depends. Like I obviously like the beginning of a fight camp I spar a lot, and then we kind of break it off.
Is it hard sparring or is it just like...
It depends. Like once a week I'll do like really hard sparring, and then the rest, like it depends. Like you're doing like drills or you're like sparring, but we're not like trying to knock each other out.
Right.
When I spar hard, I wear headgear though, because I'm trying to like at least somewhat protect myself.
Right. So that sort of balance, I guess we could transition there to mental health counseling, which you actually studied in college and have a master's degree from Iona.
Oh, you are good.
All right, yeah.
He's got a pretty good memory. He remembers all kinds of ridiculous nonsense that he doesn't need to remember.
And then there are things that I'm supposed to remember that I don't.
Yes, that is true. That is Brian accurately. Yes.
Very selective. But master's degree from Iona. In mental health counseling, and you have your own practice.
Yep.
Yeah.
So actually, I started it last January. So.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's big.
Yeah, and it's in Little Neck, New York.
Yep.
So if you guys want to check that out, you can actually Google
it. Is there a name of your practice?
Yeah, it's Create Your Balance.
Create Your Balance.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So if you could tell us more about that, and just sort of that balance between giving brain damage and helping people prevent brain damage.
Yeah, I got questions about that too.
Well, you have to be balanced, right?
Right.
So it's like,
and she's like, "Yo, I'm really living it. Like,
I'm living my truth."
Yes.
I mean, for me, it just kind of like I had. My mom tells me, she's like, "Oh, ever since you were a kid, you always told me you wanted to have like a dual career. Like you wanted to help people, and then you wanted to like be like an athlete." I'm like, "Oh wow, wait, I'm actually doing that. That's kind of cool."
Right.
Yeah. Initially I'd always wanted to do something where I was like helping kids that just, things just didn't go right for them. And so now I kind of, I see everybody because, you gotta balance out the bills, right? But I see, my primary, population I like to help is like kids and adolescents. Because to me, I feel like there's still so much, they have so much life left to live. And, if you can help them when they're younger, then they don't have to go through, their whole adulthood struggling and balancing, not having stuff going right for them. But for me, it's like, it's kind of like, I got work brain and then I got, training fight brain. And it literally, it's like a switch. It's like, oh, okay, I'm at work. Okay, cool, I switch this on. And then I leave and I'm like, oh, okay, training, I switch this on. And it's, I'm like the same person. Like my personality is the same whether I'm at work or, I'm training. But it's like I tell everybody, I'm like, I'm super smart at work, and then I shut it off, and like, I'm just dumb. I'm like, I use all my intelligence during this period of the day. The rest of it is done.
That's me when I go play video games after a long day out working.
So I kind of want to hit on what something Brian said, because what's it like in the fact that, let's circle back to this. Look, brain injuries and brain trauma is real in any kind of contact sport, especially in combat sports. One, does it concern you as a fighter? Is that something you're concerned about for your own health?
Initially I was, but, just because you are getting, hit, and especially at the beginning, when you first start training, you're going to take a lot more shots. But now it doesn't really concern me as much because I did start fighting a little bit later. I think it's more of a concern when, kids start fighting young. Or even, the adults, when you start in fighting and you're, 18, 19, your brain isn't, fully developed yet, and your risk of, long-term injuries is a lot higher. So I'm actually, happy that I kind of found the sport a little bit later because I'm like, it preserved my body and it, preserved my mind. But yeah, you never, there is always, once you get older, like what the impact's going to be. But it definitely is worse, the younger you start.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So does anybody who comes to your practice, they know what you do? They're like, you're trying to get my mental health right. You're like rattling brains. Has anybody brought that up to you?
Yeah, I actually had a before, when I wasn't at my place and I was working out of like a clinic, and I get like a little bit more questionable characters coming in sometimes. Now I can be more I can be more selective now, where I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to.
But you had to go through that process.
Yeah. And I had a guy like come in and he was flipping out. And he's like, you're telling me, I can't be fighting, I can't be doing this, and I'm, hanging out with my friends, and we see your fight come up on YouTube, and like, and I'm like, that's different. I'm like, I'm not pulling people out of cars and beating them up.
He's like, yo, we are not the same.
Yeah. He's like, I'm a professional.
He's going off, and I'm like, I couldn't help it, but I just started laughing. I don't need to tell you.
No, but like I see the humor in it, right? And that's kind of why I wanted to ask, because I kind of could see the humor in it. It's like somebody's looking at it like, yo, you're trying to tell me to be calm. You got to be charged up in there. You got to go and beat somebody up. But that's different. So you're helping people. Your mental health is just so broad. Why do you think it's so important for people to be mentally healthy? Like, I'm a big person for that advocate and think you should go see therapists or mental health counselors, or worry about your body and your mind should be one. But why is it so important for people to be mentally healthy?
And do you like the increase of awareness that is gotten? Because, I mean, this is something that's getting more and more attention.
Especially around sports, right?
Yeah, over the last, 5 to 10 years especially.
I mean, absolutely. It's, people take care of their bodies. And there's still, even though it's way better now than it was, even just a couple of years ago, there's still so much ignorance surrounding it. Like, people are real quick to go, oh, I got a headache. Let me take an Advil. Real quick to take something, for physical pain. But emotional pain, even, a lot of people I see, I have to, kind of battle with them. I'm like, you're not in a good place. You really, probably need, medication to fix it, because it's not all, there's a lot of things where you just it can't be fixed just by kind of changing your behavior. Yeah, we want to try that first. But, there's still so much ignorance surrounding, what actually goes on in the brain. It's made up of chemicals. So sometimes those things are just not working right, and you do need to kind of put them back in place. But, it's just like you want to take care of your body, you have to take care of your mind. If your mind's in a good place, nothing else is going to work out.
Do you think that's a product of people, excuse me, just being scared and not wanting to know certain things? Whereas if it's physical, it's more obvious.
Right.
Like when something's broken, you just know right away. When it's emotional, maybe you don't want to look deep and sort of discover what that is. Do you feel like it's a product of blissful ignorance?
I think more of it's just the judgment, right? Like if you tell somebody oh, you know what, I have to, my kidney's bad, I got to have kidney surgery. Where's everybody like, oh, I'm so sorry. You get you get compassion. If you're like, hey, yeah, I'm depressed, you're judged. Oh, just get up. Oh, you just got to do this. And, unless you've ever really experienced it, you don't know what it's like. It's not that easy. If it was just that easy to be like, oh, just get out of bed. Yeah, don't you think I would get out of bed?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Nobody wants to sit around the whole day. Nobody wants to be. I had to literally explain to somebody about a couple of years ago. Nobody wants to be depressed.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't sound like a good time.
Right. It's almost somebody dealing with depression.
And people also don't want to admit that they are too.
Right.
If they're feeling that way. There's also that element as well.
And I feel like that's kind of the common thing that gets depression is the common thing that also first gets associated with mental health. Right. But there's other things, right? You got people dealing with anxiety.
Yep.
You've got what are some of the things you've seen that you don't talk about your patients, but what you've seen come to you?
The biggest things I deal with are I would say right now number one is anxiety, and that pretty much all the teens I see I see them all for anxiety, and it's I think a lot of it is just the pressures that they have, school, home, and just
self-inflicted pressure also.
Social media, it's it's crazy, and I'm like, wait. I went through a couple month period where I kept getting teens in, and I'm like, yo, you guys are all different kids, but you're all exactly the same. I'm like, something's wrong.
But I'm seeing that too in terms of people I know, friends. Anxiety has been something I've noticed in the last couple of years that's more common than I probably realized initially. Right. And the friends I have, thankfully, these friends have gone for mental health counseling to try to deal with their anxiety. Is it more prevalent than we realize, anxiety? Because I feel like it was for me. Like that was kind of revealing to me that it's more prevalent than
I think almost everybody has it.
Yeah, to some degree. And
just
like,
some people can manage it, and other people like need help.
Right. Are people, is there still enough awareness that people are out there like, yo, I need to manage my anxiety? Because I think there are people also, too, who acknowledge it, but they're not really addressing
well, you get the right, because like anxiety is like the hot term right now, right?
So
then you get the people that you're like, oh yeah, no, that person like really has anxiety, and then you have the people that are just throwing it around like, oh, I just have anxiety, and they're like, nah, not really.
So
like,
explain so to stop that for a second, like, can you describe for people now what is actually anxiety and how would one identify that?
I mean, anxiety can present in so many different ways. The way I view it is like, if it impacts your life like significantly, then yeah, you really need to deal with it. If it's something like, oh, okay, you're in school and you have to do a presentation and you're feeling like butterflies in your stomach and you're really uncomfortable and you really don't want to do it, okay, that's like normal level of anxiety, right? Most people experience that. So it's like balancing the terms. It's like, yes, is that still anxiety? Yeah, but that's not the same as someone who runs out of the classroom because they can't give that presentation. They fail because they can't give it. Like, yeah, both anxiety, but one, severely impacted that person's life, and the other one, all right, you dealt with it and you did what you had to do.
Right.
And you don't, like, when you label them the same, now you just took away from that person that's really suffering.
That's a good point. There are levels to this. And how
because in some cases it's just nerves, and nerves really just mean you care.
Right, exactly. And that's labeling it better. Like, I'm like, that's normal.
Yeah.
The Sports Walk is back. Watch Season 2 of Backpack Broadcasting's original web series that brings you the opinions of real sports fans. The entire first season and current season are available now on the Sports Walk YouTube channel and Facebook page. Check out the 2017 NYC WebFest official selection and see what other sports fans have to say on the hottest issues in sports today. It's easy. Just take the Sports Walk.
Are we doing, especially through the mental health community and just society in general, are we doing a good enough job of labeling and showing the levels of different things across different spectrums and different disorders that people may be dealing with?
I think we label too much, right?
I was gonna ask you about
are we doing that, right?
Because you mentioned anxiety being like sort of a buzzword or like the thing now.
Everything's anxiety.
And now everything is sort of become about mental health to some degree, where yes, in many cases it's warranted, and then in other cases it's kind of like what everything else.
It's like a cop out sometimes.
Yeah, it kind of like what everything else, where it just gets oversaturated.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. I think, like, you see, like, why do you see all these kids, right, that are being, like, diagnosed with all this stuff? Some of them legitimately have stuff going on, and then other ones you're like, all right, he's just being a kid, right? All right, that's just a jerky kid. Or, like, it doesn't mean that something is, like, significantly wrong.
Yeah.
But because, hey, this is what we're doing right now, it's, and it's a hard thing to find, because you do want more awareness, right? And you do want more education. But then at the same time, you don't want people using it as, oh, well, I'm using it as my scapegoat. It's like, hey, if you legitimately have something going on and you get help, good for you. You know what? You're doing what you got to do. But if you're just using it as like, oh, it's like my out, then you know what? You're harming the people that are actually suffering.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And how do we also?
I was gonna throw a name out there, but let me not do that.
Were you gonna go to Kanye West?
No.
Oh, okay.
But that is one. I was actually thinking Pete Davidson.
No, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, well, you threw it out there anyway.
Well, like we talk about people out there. We just mentioned two names, and there's kind of the perception sometimes the word I feel people run to sometimes is crazy, right?
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of even a loaded.
But we're all crazy. So
I was gonna say,
right?
I mean, you obviously are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I obviously
you're still going back into fighting after all these injuries and stuff. I don't know if I could do that. But see, that doesn't necessarily mean you're crazy. That just means you've done something I haven't done.
You live on the edge.
Yeah. Well, to the point you made before, there's different levels of crazy.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's different levels to everything. There's about what people can tolerate.
There's a more sane version of crazy. and then there's just crazy.
No, it's like functional crazy versus not.
Yeah.
Not functional crazy. Right. And that it seems to be that's something that people can label really quickly on people, or there's a stigma around that in terms of getting help for mental health, right? Like, oh, this person's going to see a mental health counselor.
Oh, they crazy.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That person, something's crazy with them.
Right.
And then I also feel like that probably hinders people from actually getting the help
absolutely.
that they need, right?
And I think there's big cultural factors in it too.
Yes.
You see it different, different cultures view it differently. So you'll see like, some people where it's like, just everybody's in therapy. And then other people where it's like, oh, if you're going, you got to keep it real quiet because, you're going to go to family dinner, you're going to be judged and it's going to be bad news.
Yep. I can say this as being a black man, as I know in my culture, even more specifically to Caribbean and West Indian culture,
Hispanic too.
Therapy is not something that is necessarily embraced.
Right.
Yeah, it's not.
It's like a weakness sometimes.
Yeah, it's more embraced, I would say, by people of maybe my generation and getting younger, but not by older people. So, having these conversations, maybe like my mom or dad, is very different. They're going to be, it's like, we don't do that. We don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Man up.
Yeah, man up. Have you had to break down those barriers too when people come in and they may have certain apprehensions to the mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like right now, like being, having my own practice, it's very, very different from when I was working out of like a center. My practice is like pretty much all like people that I'm getting, coming in are all people that are reaching out themselves. So sometimes they'll still come in with like some stigmas, but I make it very comfortable, and it's literally just, I'm the same way I am. So they very quickly usually they're like, oh, okay, this is okay. But you have to kind of break it down a little bit sometimes. And, when I was working out of the center, you would see it a lot more of, people coming in and being like, or they, a parent having to bring their kid in because the school referred them. So they were at a point where they didn't have a choice now because, other people are involved and are like, oh, if you don't bring your kid for, counseling, then you're going to catch a case.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So they would come in, but they would be like resistant, and it'll be like, so I'd have to I'd work more on the parent of like kind of, all right, let me break you down because if I don't break you down, then we can't help your kid. Yeah.
And kind of to that point, how much have you gotten maybe like somebody who had they were seeing somebody else before and they didn't really feel like they gotten any help?
Because all the time.
Yeah, because you have people who are, I guess, counselors out there who are not actually.
Good.
Yeah, right. You could probably say that.
Yeah, no, I've had like people tell me horror stories. I had like somebody come in and they were seeing like this counselor for like a year, where I was like yelling at them for seeing this person for that long. And they're like, oh yeah, she was like an older lady and she would like fall asleep like in the middle of our session.
What?
Oh man.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, how long did you see this person for? And they're like, oh, about a year. I'm like, why would you keep going back?
Yeah, right. and that I feel like in that position, those people don't know.
Wrong.
And those people don't know because they probably have never seen anybody before. Like I have a friend and she was seeing therapists before at one point, and it wasn't really helpful, so she would be like, man, I don't know what to do. And then she ended up stopped seeing them at one point and just started like handling
on your
the
own.
issues
And
herself.
That's what you see all the time. That's why like literally the first session I have with somebody new is I tell them, I'm like, listen, if you don't think this is working out and like we're not meshing, I'm like, I'd rather you tell me and I'll help you find somebody that might be better. I'm like, because if you don't say that to me, then what's going to happen is you're going to stop coming and then you're the one that's hurting.
That's dope to hear because I years ago I went to see a therapist, and it was a guy, and he told me the same thing.
Yeah. In
the first session, he was like, "Look, if you're not comfortable with this, I will find somebody to help you deal with the things you need to deal with." And I was like, so I'll say this as a patient, that was calming,
right?
Because I was like, oh man,
okay. Some pressure's off.
Yeah, it's not like I have to work with you. We have to go through, these amount of sessions. It was very different. 'Cause I used to be a personal trainer, and it's like when you sell somebody on like a package, you're like, no, you're gonna do 6 sessions with me,
right?
No matter what, I'm getting paid, right? Like,
but
it's very different.
But that's something that's also impactful in your industry as well. Is I guess we could say fakery that's out there.
No, and it's like,
and
really
I feel
sad.
like that's not talked about enough either, because because it's not like as soon as you go to get help for your mental health, that's going to be fixed right away, because you might run into somebody. It's like trying to get an agent. You might have a bad agent that screws you out of a lot of deals. Yeah. You know, you might have a bad counselor who screws you up even more, or who just doesn't accommodate you at all. So how impactful is that on your industry as well?
For me, it kind of aggravates me. It makes me really angry, because I'm like,
which is also not good for your mental health.
No, not at all. Because I'm like, you know, when you have so much power to either impact someone's life in a positive way, or, you know, push them over the edge. And, you know, when you take that and, you know, you abuse it because, hey, you want to get paid, you didn't go into this for the right reasons. It's not a field that you go into to make money. Like, all right, you make enough to survive and do what you got to do, but you have to go into it wanting to, like, just help people. And if you go into it for any other reason, you're not going to do a good job. And unfortunately, you know, people are greedy. And it's like, no, I'm not going to let you, you know, even though I know I'm not a good match for you, I'm not going to let you go because I want your money.
The money.
Yeah.
How important is mental health for athletes? Because you're an athlete, so and them just being aware of their mental health, maybe these athletes having therapists, how important is that?
I think it's crucial. You know, because if your mind is not in the right place, you could be the best practice athlete out there. When you step into the game or you step into the fight, you're not going to be able to perform. You know, and I felt it, you know, usually I get my mindset really, really good before a fight. But I felt it in my last fight. Literally before I walked out to the cage, it was like, and I was like, oh, what just happened? And, you know, you're in the walkout. You don't have time to kind of pull it back together. And, you know, I'm like, you know, I felt my performance be drastically different just because, you know, my mind decided to kind of take a crap on me.
Do you have, I don't mean to get too personal, do you have a therapist? And because, you know, I always say like a therapist has got to have a therapist, right? So like, do you have a therapist or mental health counselor?
Well, I had, like, after my last fight, you know, I had considered kind of going to, go to like a sports psychologist or something like that to kind of try and work on that stuff. But the problem being, for me, being a therapist and kind of having my idea of like, hey, the way, you know, I do a lot of like cognitive behavior, which is like your thoughts and your emotions and how they impact each other. And a lot of what I was finding, because sports psychology isn't a really big field because there's not so much money in there. That there was like a lot of people that like wanted to do like psychoanalysts and stuff like that, where you're like, you know, tearing up stuff from like when you're a kid. I'm like, I'm not about that. Like, you know, I don't, you know, sometimes you need to deal with that stuff, but I don't think that that's, you know, we live in the present. So we need to deal with what
especially
we're
very much so as an athlete. Yes,
absolutely.
Definitely the present,
so I'm like, I don't want, you know, that's not what I want to do. So, you know, I do a lot just on my own.
Before UFC 231, Sajara Eubanks told me she has a fight hypnotist. I wanted to know what you think of that.
People do all kinds of weird stuff.
Like, it was I was like, what? I've never heard of that before.
I mean, if it gets her mind right, then I guess, you know.
I mean, she won that fight.
When I worked at, I had worked at Bellevue for a while, and one of the head psychiatrists there, he would do, like, hypnosis. So, like, I mean, I was, like, his subject one time because he would do it for, like, the med students.
Wait, so he tried to hypnotize you?
Yeah.
Did it work? Or did he hypnotize you?
Yeah, apparently he did.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Do you know what you did? You don't remember?
No, I don't know.
Did he tell you what you did?
Yeah, like, he didn't have us do anything crazy.
I hope not.
Like, raising your hand, doing stuff like that.
I hope so. I would be like, I'll need you to record this so I can go back and look at this.
That's so weird.
I think you're the first person I met who's ever actually told me they've been hypnotized.
Yeah, no, it was actually really cool. Like, and I was so excited about it because I knew he would do it with all the med students all the time. And one time he had a group and nobody wanted to do it. So he like came over to my office and he was like, hey, I was like, yes!
Well, of course you jumped into other stuff. Like, oh, yeah, awesome. I want to fight.
Yeah, right. Well, it's like, yeah, I mean, there are people, damn, that's so crazy. Imagine having a talent like that where you could just like, I don't know.
I would have loved to have seen the how that went or like how he did, what he did to do it.
Well, it's like, so apparently.
He didn't put anything like, he didn't do old school, like drop the clock down and just swing it back and forth.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, it was something like that.
Wait, he did do that?
Yeah. And
and it worked?
Yeah, because I don't.
Clearly, like, she says it works. She doesn't remember what she did.
It's like not everybody can get hypnotized, so it's like you have to be able to like buy into it and get like lost, like a meditation type.
Oh, that'll so work on me. Because I'm like, I don't have a great attention span sometimes.
Yeah, well, yes.
So, like I'm stupid. I'll look at the clock and be like, yo.
The clock is amazing.
Yeah, but it's just like for like for something for you to focus on.
Right.
Kind of get like lost in it. Yeah.
Lost in it.
And I'm super competitive, so I'll focus.
Yeah, okay, I wanted it to happen. I was like, I got to be the best at this.
I want to be hypnotized. You talked about sports psychology, and one of the things you said is there's not a lot of people doing it.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of money in it. My minor in college was psychology. It's kind of something I've always kind of wanted to do, and I've been thinking second phase of my career, whatever.
I forgot you had a minor.
Yeah, I want to go into sports psychology.
I could never do that.
Why do you think that is? There's just like not a lot of people in it, or not a lot of money in it, or why do you think that is?
I think because I mean, a big part of it is like insurance isn't going to cover it, right? So you have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, especially on the lower level, most athletes, aren't rolling in the dough like that. So it's like they got to make their choices. And then big sports teams absolutely do a lot of times have on staff.
On staff.
But
I think the Nets have one, actually.
If you think about it, but that's like how many out of how many are in the U.S.
That's still a very limited number of athletes and even teams, right?
Yeah, and people that can actually like land those jobs.
Yeah. I also don't think not that many people know enough probably to even like enforce that.
That's something I wanted to do, but it's also hard to find programs. Like there's nothing in New York. There's nothing.
Yeah, when I was in grad,
there are more like in the NBA now, for example, than there used to be. Like I believe the Nets have one, for example, but I'm not sure every team has broached that yet.
Yeah, but you can't find the programs even.
No, you have to. It's like usually you have to kind of like get your degree and then kind of go back and specialize afterwards. But when I was in grad school, we would pick our classes, and like on their like program thing, they had a sports psychology class, and every semester I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna take that class. So I'd try and take it. It was never offered, and then what they would do is like after the semester was over, they'd put it in like they offered it, just so they could claim they offered it, and I was like, this is not fair.
That's interesting because I just had a conversation with somebody about it in grad school because like I don't like the schools do that.
They play games with you.
It is. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
I'll say what it is. It's bullshit.
Right. Yeah, I was like, what the hell?
Like it makes the overall program look better, but you're not really offering that.
Yeah.
You're kind of hindering the students that are there.
Yeah, and I'm like, why even put it in there?
Isn't that college?
Yeah, basically. Right?
That's a whole another conversation we can get into.
We're all college educated. We can talk about this. You especially.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's just a whole other problem I have with schools and doing that, and that's. Yeah, that's not bad.
To play games with you,
messing with your mind.
Yeah.
See, school.
It's like how people. This is a thing going around on Twitter now that people are saying that college is a scam, and where it's like
absolutely is a scam.
It is.
Well, I would say more so.
And that's no disrespect to the people who gave us the degrees that we all have.
Right. Thank you for my paper.
Thank you for my paper. But,
for 4 years.
And all the paper we're still paying back in loans in terms of money.
Right, but it's more so. It's not even just college, but it's more so the business of college. And just everything that goes into that, which we've talked about greatly about, like the NCAA and all those things. Because we've seen it firsthand because we used to work at a college, which is how we met. So those things are sensitive subjects.
It is, and it is annoying. Where do you see your career and the mental health counseling going? Seems like I would assume the mental health counseling is gonna outlast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
the fighting.
I mean, right now that's why I kind of like I work enough in my practice to like maintain it and to pay my bills and do what I have to do. But because fighting there's like a timestamp, so I'm like, okay, I spent right now I can be a counselor forever, right? So okay, hey, I got things started enough to kind of be able to keep it, maintain it, and then when I'm done fighting, then okay, focus on that and let that grow and do do what I got to do with that. But right now, it's kind of focus on fighting and enjoy it while I can, and beat as many people up as I can.
Right. And one of the things
one
of the things you pointed out to me like before was because I asked you about starting late, and you're obviously in your 30s now, but you said that you can pretty much last for a longer time than probably you would expect because you started late, and there's a shelf life as opposed to your prime being in when you're 27 till 32. Right. So could you see this going on for?
Yeah, I definitely know that I have a good couple years left in me. And there definitely is because you can't even if you you see these kids starting on like really like starting to fight at 18. Okay, they've been training longer than that. It does take a toll on your body. So if you're starting younger, okay, everybody's like, oh, young athletes, but then you're still going to have that timestamp, right? It's just the number of years. Obviously, if you start too late, your body can't perform.
Right.
But for me, I don't think my body could have handled, fighting and the rigorousness of it at like 21.
Yeah.
I don't think it just wasn't, built up yet.
Yeah, whereas somebody like Max Holloway probably comes in really early, is ready right away, but then we don't know how he's going to necessarily age.
Right. Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it does take a toll. So it's like you see that, and I think with females too, we can kind of last a little bit longer than guys. And now you're seeing younger females starting, but for a while it was pretty much like people were having kids and like having a career and then fighting. Now it's transition. It's like similar to the guys, but at the beginning it was more of that. So
yeah. Who are some of your favorite fighters?
My favorite is Rose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she
needs to come back.
Yeah.
She needs to come back. She's been already out for like almost a year.
Oh yeah, really?
Her last fight was at Barclays in April, where she beat Joanna the second time.
Wow.
Yeah,
She's still UFC strawweight champion, but she hasn't fought in a while. She's had like some neck injuries and stuff like that, and she's still on the mend, I was told.
What do you think the future of the sport is going forward? The popularity has been increasing. There's no denying that. And what do you think it is?
ESPN now, UFC.
Yeah, in terms of for women,
1.2 billion.
Yeah, for women. Yeah, all that money is going to in terms of for women in the sport and Invictus.
Right.
Helping to promote women, which is
huge. And Invictus, they're doing every year they're doing more and more cards, which is great because they started off where they were doing only like 2-3 cards a year, if that. Now it's like, pretty much like once a month they have a card, which is
just
awesome.
had one, about to have another one.
Yep.
That's huge for promotion. You see this growing and getting better, more opportunities for women in the sport, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The only thing is like it's like some of it's starting to become like jokester stuff. Where it's like, like the stuff that they do, like to hype up fights or something. You're like, all right, is that actually real?
In
or
Invicta?
Is that just... No, not so much in Invicta.
Oh.
Yeah, in Invicta, you don't really see that stuff. But
that's why I was like, wait, Invicta? But no, you definitely see that in UFC.
And it's like, that if that happens too much, it takes away from it because it makes it, then it's like, oh, is this really a sport or is it now like just an entertainment?
Yeah, and I still don't like that. I still don't like that in highlight reels, for example, and this is always going to be this way, especially in boxing, but you see this in UFC. In highlight reels, when they're hyping on fights, what are you going to see? Big punches, knockouts, things like that. I'm like, yo, why can't we ever see like a good armbar in a highlight reel?
So the technical stuff isn't shown as much. No,
it's all, and, for me, I only really started doing striking like towards the end of my amateur career. It was all like jiu-jitsu. It was like, all right, I would fake my striking to get you in the clinch and then work, jiu-jitsu on you. But that's not going to get you fights. Like, you can win fights. You can school people. But people want to see you punch people in the face.
Right. Do you know how far you are from getting your black belt? Because you're a brown belt now.
Yeah, I transferred schools. I switched where I was training at last year. So, that definitely kind of like stepped things back. And now... I'm doing more of the MMA side of it, so it's definitely going to take longer than if I stuck with jiu-jitsu, I would have had my black belt already. But because now, hey, all right, I want to focus on the fighting side, I could do jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is one of those things where you can do that forever.
Yeah.
I've seen like grandmas competing, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So that's something where it's the same thing, like, with my, counseling career. It's like, all right, I can come back to that. I can always, I'm going to have my black belt at some point. It's just right now, you know what? Let me focus on the MMA side of it because I could do that right now.
Yeah, well, people should know. Don't mess with Jillian. Right. She got a brown belt. You might sleep on you because of your size.
For people that don't know,
it'll get real quick.
Yeah, for people that don't know, brown belt is like one step from black belt.
Yeah.
When I started training at my
black belt's really hard to get.
When I started training at my new spot, it was like no-gi class, so nobody saw like what belt I had. Some people knew I was a brown belt or whatever, but like. Some of the guys are like coming, they're going easy. I'm like armbarring the shit out of them, like going real hard. And they're like, oh man, how long you been training? I'm like, oh, it's like my second class.
Wow.
They're like looking at me all confused.
Like, what?
I played that out for like a couple weeks. And then I showed up to gi class with a brown belt, and they were like, really?
Really?
I'm like,
why'd you have to play us like that? You have to hurt my arm like that.
What's the best finish you've had?
Like in a fight?
Yeah.
I would say my first fight, I fought a girl, and I had fought her a couple months earlier. I did a grappling match with her, and I did an armbar from, like, the side. So before I went to the fight, I was like, oh, I'm going to armbar her the same way. And I finished the fight with the same exact armbar.
I know she wasn't feeling good about that. She's like, damn, it happened again.
Armbar from the side. I'm trying to picture
like,
it.
She's, like, they're on their side.
Oh, okay.
Was there any fight that you had where you just like, we talked about how you got the first punch and you're kind of like, oh man, but was there any fight where you're just like fighting first 30 seconds a minute, and you're just like, this is easy.
Oh yeah.
This is
really?
Yeah.
I expected no.
That was it was the only fight that I literally for from the time that the fight got signed up, I kept emailing the promoter, and I'm like, are you sure? Like, this girl wants to fight? Like, are you sure? Like, every week.
You were emailing the promoter?
Because
it would have been funny if you just asked a girl, like, are you sure you want to fight?
I mean, I finished her in like a minute, but it was like she didn't have any fights. I had a couple fights. I was a brown belt. She didn't have any jiu-jitsu. So it was like, it didn't make sense.
You've seen her train before? Like, you knew who she was already?
No, I didn't know who she was. I don't think she really trained.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah, and then he's telling me, he's like, no, she called you out specifically. I'm like, all right, then it's on.
See, that would have made me want to embarrass her more when he said that. I'd be like, oh, she called me out?
Yeah, it was done in a minute.
Like, what were you feeling when it was over and done in a minute, and you're looking into her eyes, and you know that she just got owned in a minute?
And what did you finish?
Is that face? Like, yeah, I got you.
Face. It was like, yeah, all right.
What did you finish that one with?
Ground and pound for the mount.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Elbows or punches?
Oh, punches, because it was amateur, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If it was
pro.
If it was pro.
Oh, it would have been wrecked.
Oh, my God.
And I assume, being a professional, you have never had a fight that easy again.
No.
No. Let me ask you.
Especially, I mean, being, if I would have fought on like some of these other lower level promotions, yeah, probably I would have had some easy fights. But Invicta, you're getting the top of the food chain.
Yeah, so you're not getting any slouches there.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Let me ask you this. Gerard thinks this is hilarious, but I brought this up the other day. So what's it called? We were talking about the Joe Rogan theory where people should fight bare knuckle.
Okay.
So I was wondering what you think about that, just from an actual fighter's perspective, because obviously, like, the way he explains it and the way I explained it to Gerard was like, look, it will cause you. I'm not endorsing it.
Right.
I'm just applying his logic, and what he's saying is it would cause you to fight a little bit smarter. What I mean by that is you take off the glove, then if I tell you to hit this table, Dexter, right? If I tell you to hit this table and you have a glove on, you'd be inclined to do it as hard as you could. Now, if I take the glove off, you'll probably be like, I don't know. So it will cause you to fight a little smarter, although it is your bare hand after all. But he also says, like, why are you allowed to do elbows and knees,
but not bare knuckles?
Like that?
That's a fair point.
Yeah, it was actually a fair point. So I was like, I didn't fully know if I agreed or disagreed. I'd rather hear Jillian's side.
Yeah, let's hear from a professional.
So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea at all, because the gloves inhibit your grappling. Like,
that is true.
You know, especially when you have like smaller hands, like, just grabbing the wrist and doing everything, it's hard to grapple with the gloves on.
Yeah.
And then how many people break their hands and they're taped and have their have
Floyd
gloves
Mayweather
on,
used to break it all the time.
they're breaking their hands. So it's like,
despite
all right,
the gloves being on, right?
Yeah, so it's not really that it protects you. All right, maybe it protects you when you're getting hit a little bit, but not that much.
I think it's more of a visual thing where, I mean, like,
I think it's those like cover your ass things.
Yeah. Like,
we put these safety measures in place that aren't really safety
measures.
Yeah, because like would ESPN give UFC over $1 billion if it was bare knuckle? Right. Probably not. You know what I mean? Like,
right, because then it's really barbaric.
And then it looks,
right,
and then
because you're gonna see bloody knuckles and
other
stuff.
Right, it's just the image of it. But now there is a bare knuckle promotion now. I think Beck Rawlings is actually Yeah, there's a bare knuckle promotion that's going on now that former MMA fighters have fought in and other people.
Interesting.
And
it's just
on
boxing and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, they just
they just kill each other.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like when you watch it, you're like,
it's it's just got real. Like, probably not good for your physical or mental health.
Probably not. Probably not about that. Well, Jillian, thank you for joining us.
We just got to pick a number.
We really appreciate it. Well, we have this thing, right? We pick a number.
So I don't know if you've seen the artwork that we post, but so when we have the artwork for the episode, we will pick a number representing the episode based off of what athletes wore those uniforms. I don't know how familiar you're going to be with some of these names because obviously it's hard to tie in fighting, which I always try to do. I try to do episode
because he loves violence.
Yeah, I try to do it with episode 56. I was like, Muhammad Ali at 56 wins. He's Muhammad Ali, but then Lawrence Taylor. I'm kind of like even though he's problematic, LT had to kind of be the one there. So with 57, you said you're not a Met fan, but we do have Johan Santana on this list. I'm sure you remember him, and that's somebody that we're probably going to go with, but I'm going to just go through the other names.
Go through the list
real quick. Francisco Rodriguez.
Good Met for a while. This is K-Rod we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, very common name, so I understand.
Yes.
Daryl Kyle, who's late.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember when he passed away, which is kind of crazy.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Pitched for the Astros, right?
And the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Mo Lewis and Bar Scott both wore 57 for the Jets.
Yep.
Bar Scott's your boy. You were telling me
Bar Scott's a cool dude.
We got to get him here.
Yeah.
Ricky Jackson, who I don't remember who that is.
I don't either.
I put it on the list. I'm like,
was he a wide receiver? No, not a wide receiver.
57 can't be a wide receiver.
I don't even know.
Has to be a linebacker.
Yeah, it has to be a linebacker.
Because the next guy, it has to be a linebacker.
Yeah.
Then Tom Jackson.
Yep.
And Clay Matthews. So, yeah.
I'm going with Johan Santana.
Do you have a vote here or do you not care?
I'm like, whoever you guys say.
Right. All right. We're going with
Okay.
Johan Santana. There we go.
Okay. Well, Johan Santana is good for everybody's mental health. That's good. He did a picture perfect game for them.
Sounds good.
Real quick, predictions on the two main events for UFC 232.
Yes.
Jones, Gustafsson, Nunez, Cyborg. I will come out and say that I do think Jones is going to win.
I don't want him to win, though.
Yeah?
No, because,
You got a rep for New York? No, I'm joking.
Yeah, but
She's
just
like, I
all the
don't have to.
background stuff, it's
Yeah.
like, But I agree. I think he's going to win.
I think he's going to win to some degree. I see where your point is. Like, I don't know how great it is for the sport. Although for the UFC, it would be great because
but they don't.
want...
The UFC doesn't really care, honestly. It's like,
Clearly.
the more
No, right.
views you're going to bring, the more controversy,
That's
the more
all they
we want
care.
you.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking of mental health, I mean, he's somebody who's struggled with that in the past.
Yes.
And then Cyborg versus Nunez, we were talking about.
Cyborg, yeah.
Everything Cyborg's going to win. I'm inclined to somewhat agree that Cyborg has the advantage. I'm not discrediting Nunez in part because we did have lunch last week. So
you could have told her over lunch that Cyborg had the advantage. So I can see that.
Flip the table.
Yeah.
Well, I think she's bigger, but also I do think that Nunez she's improved a lot over the last 7 fights that she's had this big winning streak, and she's also coming up, so there's not really going to be a bad weight cut for her. Whereas for Cyborg,
but that's a good and bad. When you're coming up and you're not cutting as much. All right, you're not cutting as much, but then you're also not putting on as much after.
Which is why I think that was also the difference in Valentina versus Joanna. Like you could see it.
You could see they were like two different people.
She was like Valentina. Valentina used to be 135. And Joanna was champion for a long time at 115. So they sort of met in the middle, which obviously benefits Valentina, who barely had to lose weight to make 135. So she probably had to lose 10, 12, 15 pounds to make 125. Her back is huge. And on top of all that, the size advantage, she's also really, really good. Like, she's a killer.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Joanna is, more so at 115, where you could see at 125 the power doesn't translate that much. She'll probably beat most of that division, but the champion, I'm not so sure.
Absolutely.
It's just that big of a difference. All right. So that's your predictions for 232.
That's my predictions.
All right, and we look forward to finding out your next fight. We got to bring you up here again.
Yeah, when I'm actually fighting, hopefully.
Beat up some more people, and we need you to come back healthy, mentally and physically.
Right.
We need that as well.
And it's been a while already because the last fight was in August?
It was July, end of July.
July.
Yeah, because I remember you telling me. Brian told me about you. I remember it was a while ago.
Yeah, it was end of July. But that's like Invicta. Sometimes you're waiting. It's a waiting game.
Right.
That kind of sucks.
Do they allow fighters to, like, if you wanted to fight?
Yeah, you can fight outside. I've looked for stuff outside. It's just at 105. It's
hard to find them.
Yeah. And it's like I don't want to take a fight against. I want to take somebody legit.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, everybody that's pretty much legit is an Invicta. So it's like.
That's true too, because
you
probably
get that like.
Yeah.
And then you get torn because it's like, oh. I want to fight, but then I don't want to, I don't want to take a fight somewhere else, and then they offer a fight, and it's like, damn, wait.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, and you don't want to do a 115 or a 110 catch weight or something like that.
Yeah, like I would do a catch weight, like that would be.
You would do
right.
110 catch weight.
That would be fine. But 115, unless there's somebody else that's coming up from 105, I'm small for 115.
Yeah, but then in that case, you could just fight at 105.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, like why not just do that?
Yeah. I mean, less of a cut for me.
Yep,
cool.
Right.
All right, well, we're wishing you the best of luck in your next fight, and hope to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time and coming up.
Thank you for having me.
Right, once again, that's Jillian DeCoursey. That's Jillian DeCoursey, mixed martial artist from Invicta Fight Championships and mental health counselor, doing some great work. For Brian Fonseca.
Yes.
I'm Dexter Henry for episode 57 of the Ain't Hard to Tell podcast. Peace, guys.